Cheers.
Welcome to the show, Stephen.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
A little spice to it.
Anytime, bro. Yeah, more like, ooh, that is spicy.
A little spice to that.
It's sweet.
That's got some ha-cha-cha going on. That's.
We like it? Caramelly.
No, I do like the flavor of it.
Yeah.
I do.
Yeah.
It is caramelly. And has a very long, lingering taste.
I think it's the candy.
Mortlock, 15 years.
All the sugar in our
It's
mouth.
all the sugar. That
I feel
Stephen
like it's
brought.
been a long time since we actually talked about whiskey on this show.
Well, we know like the listeners are always asking, like, what whiskey did you have? Like,
Yeah. Well, what's the Mortlock 15 year?
yeah.
It's good.
I got it on a trip recently to Beijing. They have these whiskey shops just in the mall now, like little whiskey clubs.
Interesting.
So I asked the owner, I said, hey, what's good? They had everything. They had like Yamazaki, like 30, like it's nothing.
Oof.
Yeah.
If you can afford it.
Yeah.
Anyway, Steven,
Hi.
welcome to the show, bro.
Thank you so much for having me.
How you been, man?
I've been good. This is an interesting experience for sure. I remember you guys talking with Lee about this. You guys were all like PD fans, I think, right? Or
Oh no,
most of you?
he was, and how we likes PD. I don't like PD whiskey.
Okay, because I'm like way on the other end.
You don't like it.
I like them like super smoky.
Oh shit.
So you like them? Yeah.
Yeah, like the Lafroigs and stuff like that.
Oh,
It's like-
okay.
Isla.
I was gonna bring one today. Yeah.
Really? I'm like I'll drink it. I appreciate it, but I don't prefer the whiskey stuff. I mean the smoky stuff.
Do you guys drink baijiu?
We haven't on the show yet. No.
Oh, fuck, shit done that.
You like Baijiu?
I was gonna bring a bottle. Yeah.
Really?
Ooh.
Okay.
Next time.
Yeah.
I drink a
We'll
fair
have round
amount of
two.
baijiu for sure. Yeah, that'll be fun.
But Steven, what?
Are you like, I just want to stick on the Baijiu for 1 second. Is that something that you've been on for like, because I didn't have it until I moved to China, right? Baijiu for the first time.
Yeah.
Was that something that you had here or?
Yeah, so my family's from Henan, and they drink a fuck ton of baijiu there, obviously. Like, my grandmother drinks it still, you know, she's like 78. She drinks like early on Meitian. First time I had baijiu, I was 8, so we kind of grew up with it.
Wow.
Wow.
There's like, I only drink baijiu with Chinese food, but I like jiaozi, especially jiaozi and like jiucai.
Well, do you only drink it when you're eating, or do you ever drink it when like it's not a meal and you're just drinking?
Sometimes, yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, when shit gets crazy, right?
Depends on the day. But no, baijiu is nice. I appreciate baijiu. Yeah.
Well, we'll try it next time.
Is he
We'll
the
get
only one
shit-faced
here?
on the show?
Yeah, right.
I don't think we know how to drink it. Like, we don't really know anyone that drinks it. But if you meet someone that drinks it, then maybe we can go along for the ride.
Yeah.
Well, no, we should
Next
do a
time, for
baijiu
sure.
show next time.
Yeah.
Just bring it on next time.
No,
we're
there's
back.
like good baijiu. It's like all types of alcohol, right? There's bad scotch, there's good scotch, there's bad vodka.
Yeah,
Yeah.
For sure.
We just want the good stuff.
We won't remember the show, but it's fine. Like, we'll record it.
But Steven, I was really interested in kind of what you're doing with the Noodle Shop. It's called the Noodle Shop, right?
Correct. Yes.
So, what is the Noodle Shop? Can you explain it to kind of our listeners and even Howie and Eric?
Sure. For now, it's a medium publication. It started off as an idea like maybe a year ago. We shot a pilot for it last Christmas, and I realized how much work goes into video production that I didn't know or understand. And then COVID hit, and I've been doing a lot of writing. So I just set a goal to write about things I care about in June every day, and then I put out an ad, and a lot of people responded. So I think what I found really interesting was there isn't a lot of, Asian people don't talk about shit. Like, that's just a thing. I think you guys have talked about this on the show. I've heard a couple of times. Right? Good shit, bad shit, doesn't matter. We just don't talk about shit, and especially from a first-person perspective. I don't know if you guys agree.
I 100% agree.
Yeah.
I feel like it's
It's like we're not in touch with the emotions, right?
well, it's like it's not that we're not in touch, but it's just like I feel like there's this awkwardness to share with family, right? There's this
Yeah, for sure.
awkwardness, like not to say we're not close to our parents and siblings. Of course we are, but I think like at least maybe this is an Asian thing, but I feel like there's always this like kind of awkwardness to share like real feelings and emotions with your family, with the people that are supposed to be the closest to you, right? But there's this like, I don't know how to explain it.
Do you share with other people though, like friends? Like, is it easier for you to share with like, colleagues? Or
It would be easier for me to share with friends than it would be
Right.
my own family.
Cool.
And it's not that I don't want to. It's just I just feel it's awkward, and I feel like they would feel it's awkward too.
For sure.
Because like we don't. It's not like that. We're not only saying, "Oh, I love you" and blah blah blah.
Yeah.
That might be more of a Western thing. in terms of like people like really like expressing a lot of emotion like to your parents? Maybe I don't know.
Yeah. So I mean, for now, it's a publication on Medium. Put on an ad. A lot of people responded. They wanted to write. So we view ourselves as a platform that seeks young Asian creative people, especially writers for now. And we try to tell stories in like a first or third person perspective.
But what's the mission? Like, what's the mission for this?
The mission, it's really funny. I just had a conversation yesterday with a friend. For me personally, the mission is about things that I feel like our generation, and I feel like I'm on the edge. I was born in 1990. I think you guys are a little older, right?
Yeah, we're not.
I know.
But like generation here.
My generation and older, I would say, is we didn't think about a lot of these things when we were younger, like our identity, our part of society, et cetera, who we are, all that shit. But I think now that we're older, we think about it. But a lot of us are already stuck in our ways and our jobs and families, whatever. Whereas I feel like with the younger people, they can still really make a difference. You know, so I think for me, the personal mission is just to put more stories out there for them to feel like that's okay.
But is this really pertain like for like Asians? Or is it?
Yeah, I mean, the way I see it is, there's this brand, you guys I'm sure you know, Fubu, for us, by us, right? By Knows. And sure, we're not starting a clothing company, but I think the idea is the same. I think the idea is, you know, I want to find like Asian kids in like Hungary or, you know, in like Czechoslovakia. I think one of the first things we're looking at is like stringing stories together. So hypothetically, one of the things is like, we talk about interracial dating a lot. Right, but for example, if we string 3 stories together, something like Chicken Soup, Noodle for the Soul. Do you guys remember those books? And we publish them in short story format, you know, where it's all girls, so 3 Asian girls through 3 very different lenses, like one from Africa, one from Singapore, one from the US. You know, just to kind of string together new forms of media is what we're trying to do right now. Yeah, we'll see how it goes.
I like it, man. I really like that idea. And I think there's definitely not only a market for it, but there's a need for it from where I stand. Like just to give young Asian people more of a voice. There's an article I saw that you had written that I thought was a pretty good article, and you were talking about like how come there's like not that many Asian writers, right?
Right.
And I feel like that's all connected in terms of like kind of like expressing yourself, or even like the creative arts. There's not that many Asians doing it, in terms of they all kind of gravitate towards like this more stereotypical jobs, hard sciences, like you said, like, you know, mathematics or science or engineering and shit like that.
Yeah.
And so like what kind of spawned you, like what got you to notice this and want to write about it?
I do a lot of reading, but also I feel like, especially with recent events, there's been so much focus on like African Americans and their history and their culture, which is great. You know, there's the whole entire Me Too thing as well, which is also great. But it also makes you kind of reflect on other things. Like, I think we also as a society,
It's like, hey, we're here too, right? Kind of thing.
Yeah. And you know, when Andrew Yang happened, for me, it was really cool to kind of see the effects of this would have on younger kids, and most importantly, the parents, right? Because I actually don't think the problem is with the kids, the problem is with the parents, right? So seeing Andrew Yang make some Asian parents go, you know what, maybe my son or daughter can go into politics and it'll be fine, right? So like, it doesn't necessarily need to go, in my opinion, from doctor to DJ. It can go from like doctor to hairdresser, right? Or doctor to fucking, you know, I don't know, chicken shop owner.
Yeah, it doesn't have to go from one extreme to the other.
Yeah, for sure. So I think our goal is to kind of just show different shades of Asian people, I guess.
I think that's great.
Yeah, and he's the first guest that ever brought up Andrew Yang. I used to always bring him up.
Oh, Yang,
Huge fan.
yeah,
Fucking
sure,
Yang
yeah.
gang, bro.
Huge fan. Yeah.
Fucking Yang gang.
In there early, because he was on Joe Rogan very early in his campaign, right? And he made too much sense. That's a problem, right? Like what he said just made too much sense.
And he's fucking Asian, so I mean, it's gonna be, it's like let's call a spade, man. I mean, that definitely hurt his chances of actually being considered like a serious.
So you don't think the U.S. is ready for an Asian president?
Not right now, no.
No.
Look how big of a deal it was just to get their first like black president, and now the kind of the spotlight is on on women, right? Because you got Kamala Harris, right now.
Where do you fit in with like Latino? Like, does it go black?
Oh,
woman?
like, where's that?
Yeah, Latino, Asian or
probably Latino before Asian would be.
okay.
I would probably guess you would see a Latino president before you saw an Asian president in America.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah.
and you just know that even if it was Asian, it wasn't gonna be Chinese. Like given the current situation,
Yeah, of course not.
there's-
Like,
so you're
how
like last
awkward
on
would
the
that be,
list,
right?
You would never.
Look, number one, you would never get all the votes because most people would be like, "What the fuck?"
Right.
Even with Andrew Yang.
No,
I mean,
yeah,
it's like, you see a Chinese face, you see a last name Yang, and especially now with all the tension between U.S. and China, right, and how tense it is there, and the atmosphere they have there, there's never going to be like an ethnically Chinese U.S. president in the near future, for sure, in my opinion. Right?
I think there might be. We'll see.
Well, how long? How long do you guess?
Before we die.
So what? Next
50 years.
before we die, then next 10 years.
We'll see.
Depends how you live. No, but it's true. But it's like what you just asked about. You think America is ready for an Asian president?
Right.
I mean, you can just go down the ranks. Is America ready for an Asian pop star in America? Like a
that's a
Chinese,
good question.
like a guy that's like a.
Well, isn't like K-pop really popular there?
Yeah, but that's for different reasons.
different.
Yeah. It's for sure. I agree with them. It's for
I'm saying an
different reasons.
American.
What's the reasons then? What are these reasons?
Because K-pop's from Korea, right? And like it appeals to a certain type of audience. Like I think their audience demographic is very similar to Disney's.
Okay.
Right? A lot of parents, a lot of kids, a lot of teens, and I don't know. I should check that out.
I mean, I see an Asian kind of pop star popular in America pretty soon, relatively soon.
Do you have a name? Or,
No, I don't. But
do you
I
guys-
can see it. I can
Like
imagine.
the closest is like what Rich Brian, right?
He's also not American.
But see, like
Yeah,
that,
he's
I
not
can
American.
imagine.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But like a president, I can't imagine that in the near future for America. But I can imagine some sort of
president
like, big
first.
But that's what I'm saying. Like you got to go through the ranks, right? I feel like step by step, man. Like you jump into the
You gotta put your
president.
toe in the water first.
Jump into the
Right.
president.
The American public has to kind of get like used to the idea.
We
of,
don't
like,
even have like a full-fledged male
Leading role.
that's not a kung fu star.
Yeah.
I mean, come on.
Getting there though. Getting there.
getting there.
Yeah.
You
Very
see, you
quickly,
see some
for sure.
progress in Hollywood for sure, but there's no like full fledged, especially like romantic male.
It's like a
leading role.
sexy male.
Yeah.
Right. Who would play him?
Well, it depends
Well, that's
on the role.
well, that's
I
the
don't
thing,
know.
right?
We got to discover
yeah,
him first.
Yeah,
Okay,
they're not
okay,
out
cool.
there. I mean, who's the most famous Asian male star now? Like John Cho.
John Cho.
He's
I would
not
think
he's not like a sex symbol. He's
No, the
just-
new Marvel guy. The what's his name? The Simu Liu.
oh Shang-Chi. It was
Yeah,
like playing
Shang-Chi.
the-
Yeah.
But he's not a big name yet, though. He's like
Nah,
he's not like a name.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
It's
I
the
think
same
that's
for girls though. I mean, like Aquafina's big, but she's not like
Well, you have
Julia
Lucy
Roberts,
Liu,
right?
Yeah, Lucy Liu
Yeah.
back in the day.
Because
Lucy
women are
was great.
sexualized
Yeah.
there, and men are not. Asian men are not. You know.
Did you guys feel that growing up in the U.S. or? Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting. So one of the pieces I think I wrote, one of the topics I write about a lot is just dating in general, but also like interracial dating. For a lot of my 20s, I mostly dated white girls, which is fine. I was young, and
You say it like you have shame or something.
well, it's people change, right? Now it just happened that way. It wasn't by design or anything. That's what I meant. But like the amount of times I've heard people say, I'm just not attracted to Asian guys for like no reason.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And
Yeah.
I'm not consistently attracted to say African girls, but that's an exposure issue in my opinion. Right. And even having said that, there are absolutely black girls who I think are beautiful. I would never say I'm not attracted to black girls because they're black, because that's just not true. But I've had so many people tell me that, and I'm just like, wow, I think that's racism.
Yeah.
Right. I'm not sure.
Or have you ever heard this? Like, if you dated like a non-Asian girl, and then they go, "Wow, I never thought I'd be attracted to an Asian. You're the first."
Yeah.
Or something like that, right?
For sure. It's definitely interesting.
What about you, Eric? You ever had anything like that?
No. No, I don't discriminate.
Yeah.
I'm saying
It's
like
good to
towards
not
you. I'm saying
discriminate.
like, have you ever had any of those kind of remarks towards you?
No.
Well, I did, and it really fucks with like growing up there as a young kid, as a teenager. It really fucks with your fucking confidence, man. Like your sexual confidence.
Right.
And I grew up in a predominantly white neighborhood, white area. My school was predominantly white. And so I was like one of the very few Asian kids there. And yeah, it was like there was this different kind of nervousness, an increased amount of nervousness for me to like approach like white girls. versus approaching Asian girls. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it was weird. It was weird. And like when I go to social events, like you have this anxiety and exactly what you say, like you just got this feeling, whether it was real or not, but you definitely got this feeling like just like white girls and even like ABC girls there, right? Like just weren't attracted to Asian men, you know?
Yeah. How do you feel now, if I may ask?
I feel it's a lot better.
Okay.
But I feel like there's definitely still some of that depending on where you are,
Right.
and kind of what kind of community you're in, right?
For sure. Yeah.
And I think it's not like they were born that way. I think it's also through like culture and media and entertainment.
Yeah.
You kind of get like brainwashed because the Chinese or the Asian man in America was never sexualized. In fact, it was opposite.
I do think that's changing, though, to be like 100% honest with you.
Yeah.
Which is cool. Yeah. Looking forward to it.
Did you see that? Did you see that ESPN 30 for 30 on Bruce Lee?
I still have not.
Oh,
no.
dude.
Yeah. Is it good?
It's good, and
I need to watch that.
it got me like emotionally.
Yeah.
Like I got choked up.
Yeah.
I got choked up because it kind of touched on kind of these things we're talking about, like because like, you know, Bruce Lee was trying to be a star, right, in America, and he was full of confidence and everything like that, but like the world, like this, America just wasn't ready for him yet. You know what I mean? There wasn't ready for him to be like a star, you know, and like a household name.
Yeah. How do you think that would start? Like, how do you, like, I think the way I understand this is that this is going to have to be a process.
Of course.
Right? Like, it's not, people aren't just going to wake up one day and it's going to change, right? Like, does it start with like movies and like, what, like porn, or like how does it start?
The specific steps, I don't know, but it all needs time.
We should start a movement, you know. We should.
It's gonna happen naturally with time. Yeah, we should start a movement right now. Me and you, Stephen. Let's start a movement.
Facebook. Yeah.
No, but I think like the things you're doing is all part of that process, right? Like your mission with the Noodle Shop to create a platform for young Asian voices. I mean, that is the process.
Yeah, you know what's been really cool about it, to be 100% honest with you, is like I've been here 7 years. I've done my fair amount of shit. Some of it good, some of it not good. But this was, I think, the first organic thing, because there was zero expectations going into it. And like I put out a notice on like a Facebook group called ACN Writing, and like 20 people responded that they want to contribute. You know, and then I met a girl in Shanghai who's now my partner in this, and she's amazing, and just like the energy that she brings to this. We now have 12 staff writers who are unpaid, who just onboarded.
Damn.
In like Kenya, you know, 3 on the East Coast, Singapore, Portugal.
Nice.
Just seeing that response from like a younger generation has been really, really cool, to be honest with you.
But you're gonna have a lot of passionate people to be
Sure.
part of this. You know what I mean?
We hope so. Yeah. Hope you guys included, hopefully. Yeah.
Hell yeah, man. Like you said, we're all doing our part, right?
Yeah.
Like the writers you have, like they're just in it just because they just believe in kind of that mission, that message, and just kind of want to express themselves.
Yeah. You know, a lot of them are very young. You know, like we have this guy named Kyle who I think is like 19 or 20. He's in Boston, and he's very part of the whole Black Lives Matter movement. You know, he did a program called Bao's Lives Matter. I'm butchering the name. Sorry, Kyle. But basically, he sold baozis to raise money to donate to
In Boston.
In Boston, yeah.
Nice.
This is happening now, I think. I'll plug him. But basically, he used the baozi as a gateway for Asian kids to talk to their parents. Because a lot of Asian parents in the U.S., first generation or even older, they don't really give a fuck about this. They don't understand it, right? They're just like, no, stay home, keep your head down.
Yeah.
Right? So he's using this baozi as like a way, as a fundraiser to have these conversations.
So what is he
which
doing?
really cool.
He's selling buns,
Yeah,
right?
it's a fundraiser. Yeah, it's like Girl Scout cookies, right?
And what is he doing with the money? What he's putting?
He's donating it to the Black Lives Matter movement.
Oh, wow,
charity and
okay.
stuff, yeah.
Oh, that's fucking awesome.
20-year-old kid, you know, or 21. So like it's people like that have volunteered to kind of help us out and write. So our goal for the next 30 to 60 days is to write and then look at new forms of media and see where that goes, really. We'll see how that goes.
It's fucking awesome, man. I wish you the best of luck with that.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Like and also something you written in that article that you did about the writers really struck me as like how important, because like you think about the consequences, and when you say, oh, there's not a lot of Asian writers, a lot of people might be like, okay, so what?
Right.
There's a lot more other important shit to do, right? But like you're right. You highlighted the importance of having like articulate and skilled and talented writers that represent your culture.
Sure.
Because they're gonna be that written legacy that kind of passes that culture and understanding of that culture to people who might not be aware or might not understand. They're going to be that lasting voice. It's going to be that written word, right? Well, now it's like digital, but like it's still written word.
Yeah.
And to have people who are good at it, who are good at getting that message across in a way that people can accept it and be entertained by it as well, that's extremely important.
Yeah. You know, and like the thing that really fucks with my head is all Asian cultures have a really rich history of the written word. Right, like China's been documenting shit for thousands of years, as has Japan, Korea. You know, even the islands to a degree have documented stuff. And then just somewhere along the way, we as a culture have lost this for like whatever reason, right? But I think what a lot of Asian families value these days, and I think a lot of it's because of wars in the 1900s, but is not arts and culture, even though we have a very rich history of that. Like China has a super rich history of arts and culture, right? So I think maybe there'll be a next wave coming, whether it'll be the next 10 years, 100 years. I don't know. We'll see.
I think it's because it's not a priority, right? It's like survival's priority.
Yeah, but maybe we're kind of past. I think maybe our generation was the first one that kind of went past survival.
Yeah.
Right, because even our parents who immigrated, it was still about survival, right? You know, and when you see the younger kids now, it's really about change. It's really cool to see, to be honest with you.
Well, like it's good you say priority because, like, okay, if it's not prioritized now, what took its place, right? And like you can point to like money, right? Like everything. Security, right? Exactly. I guess ultimately money is security, right? So it's all about security. It's all about make your money, be successful financially to have that security, and that's been like the main goal and priority of pretty much every family, right? Let alone Asian families.
Yeah,
But I
sure.
feel like more so in China, like Chinese.
Yeah, but in China, it's more like I don't care what you're passionate about. Do something that has the biggest chance of you actually making money.
Yeah, but like life was hard, man. Like I've been here 7 years. Y'all been here longer. But when I first came here, we were riding scooters, you know, and like just random old ass lady would cross the street without looking, and you get pissed at her. And now I view it very differently because you have to understand, for the first 50 to 60 years of her life, there were no roads, there were no scooters, there were no streetlights, there was no look left, right, and we are imposing our views on her at 16. That's kind of hard to change.
Yeah,
you know,
it's not really fair.
Yeah, I don't even need to go back to my grandmother. Like I can go back to like my uncles. They were rationing, right? And I'm sure you guys have similar experiences of it. They were rationing back then, which is totally fine. Like that's just where China was. I just feel like we're so myopic. Like the United States for the 1600s, 1700s, 1800s, 1900s was violent as fuck, you know, and people were terrible. And as was the UK with the Industrial Revolution. And China's having its moment now. That's just part of history.
Yeah, it's like Renaissance period, or it's re-Renaissance period because it's had several Renaissance periods
For sure.
in the ancient past, right? But like, I think that's exactly right. Like, I think you're gonna definitely see like the ABC, and when I say ABC, it falls into the umbrella of all like Western-born Chinese people. So like you're from Canada, CBC or whatever.
Yeah.
But all those kind of Western-born Chinese, in a few generations, it's almost going to be unrecognizable to like kind of the culture we know of what an ABC is, right?
sure.
Because like a lot of us, like our parents were the first generation that had moved and immigrated to America, right? For many of us. So they came, like our parents came with that very like kind of Chinese mindset. A lot of them, they were very conventional or traditional, and they brought that culture over. So we're like a little more close to it. Inevitably, and it brings me no joy to say this, but inevitably through generations, that's gonna get diluted.
Right.
Right? That sense of closeness to the old country is gonna get diluted. And you know, just look at us. Like our Chinese and Mandarin isn't nearly as good as our parents. So that means our kids is likely gonna be even worse. You know what I mean? So things like this and the cultural understanding, because they had actually had firsthand knowledge, things like that, it's gonna get diluted. And so I think culturally speaking, maybe the pressures and the expectations and the mindset of, you know, future ABC type kids are going to be completely different than what we know and what we grew up with.
Right.
Yeah.
No, I completely agree. I wanted to go back to what he said earlier about the whole ABC thing. I've always found this really interesting, you know, because I have a lot of European Asian friends, and they don't define themselves like that, right? They're just Dutch, right? Or they're just Norwegian. Or they're just Spanish. Like the Spanish ones are like incredibly Spanish, you know, like you can hear it in their fucking accent, right? But like it's us, and I guess me included as well, but more the Americans, where you need to define yourself. And I feel like that's actually very ironically American of you to need to distinguish yourself like that.
Yeah.
right? Which is great. I mean, that's part of the beauty of America, or was the beauty of America. You know, and if you had, do you guys have kids? Do any of you have kids?
No.
Right. If you had kids, don't you wish that they don't limit themselves like that? That they wouldn't say, "Oh, I'm ABC because my dad was ABC," right? You just you hope for a better future for them, a more inclusive future. And I think for me personally, that's done through media, and that's why I'm in media right now. Like I wanna find Asian kids from Helsinki. They exist, I promise you. You know, because there's Asian people everywhere. But we want to build that new world order, I guess you can say, in a way.
Well, what about, like, because you're in China, we're in Shanghai now. So what about starting off here in terms of just digging out all the stories you can? Because, I mean, forget Helsinki and everywhere else for now.
Sure.
I mean, I'm sure there's so many, you know, young and talented and ambitious and passionate Asian kids here, whether they're ABC or not, or westernized or not,
Right.
with incredible stories to tell. You know?
Yeah. I mean, we're looking into it, definitely. Once again, this was not something that I planned. It just organically happened this way over the last month or two, you know, and we're just trying to figure out what we want to be at this point. But it's a very exciting time, and I have a very exciting staff on board. There's just, when you work with young people like that over something they're very clearly passionate about, it's very energizing.
Right. What was like that spark though that sent you down this path? I mean, I know you started this and you saw you got like a really incredible positive response, so that kind of gave you encouragement. But even before that, like, what brought your like mind space to even like in this direction to even do this?
Okay, you know, short answer or the long answer,
whatever you want to do.
You know, I think for me, it's when you guys are all from the U.S., so you understand when you talk to non-Asian people about Asian people, they just all think everyone's Chinese, right? Or they all think everybody looks Chinese, or maybe Chinese or Japanese. But you have to understand, Asian people make up the majority of the people in this world, right? So I think it's just incredibly naive to think we're all the same. So I think what originally started this for me was just to be able to show that, yes, we're Asian, but every Asian person is different. You know, there are Asians who play the guitar or do podcasts, right? But they're also Asian doctors. That's kind of how this started for me. You know, I've never really kind of fit into anything. So I've always had an identity crisis. I was telling you guys about my past. I grew up in Germany and then Canada, but I would never consider myself ABC. Not as disrespect or anything. Some of my best friends here are ABC or CBC, but I just don't really fit that mold. So I've always kind of been on the outside looking in. And now it's just kind of seeing that grow, and you know, I just turned 30, so I'm very comfortable with who I am for the first time in my life. You know, it's a very empowering moment to kind of, instead of looking at your life 2 or 3 years at a time, look at your life 50 years at a time. You know, it's an active decision I made over the last year. You know, you guys do a creative art here as well, so you guys understand. You understand this versus getting an accounting job or something, right? You know, so I decided to take a year away from everything and kind of focus on this and see where it goes.
But what's this identity crisis you're talking about, though? Like, what do you mean by that?
Yeah, so the best way I can summarize this is when you ask most people where they're from, they'll tell you where they're from. When you ask me where I'm from, like you guys have done tonight, I tell you a series of events. Right? I don't really identify with anything more than another at this point. I would say I'm Canadian. I'm legally Canadian. But there are times I feel very Chinese. There are times when I'm drinking baijiu with my grandmother where I feel very Chinese. Every time I go back to Germany, I love Germany. I feel very German, you know, so I don't have that like root, I guess you can say.
How old were you when you left China?
I left China at 3 in 1993. And then we left Germany in 99 and then Canada 2000.
Are you fluent in Mandarin though?
Hi, Haoba.
Yeah.
So is it more of just like you just view countries as kind of it's just land with borders around it, and like I'm a human being, so like why do I need to label myself any sort of nationality? Nationality is not necessarily, it's like a very human construct.
Sure.
And it has nothing to do with like kind of who we are,
Sure.
I guess.
Yeah.
Is it kind of more of that kind of philosophy? It's like you just don't care to label yourself as any nationality. It's like that's not how we should be defining ourselves.
Right. I don't really think you have a choice in how you feel about that, or at least I don't, right? Like I wish I could just simplify and identify as Canadian, but that's just not reality. Like when Tim Hortons first opened here, I felt incredibly Canadian, you know, and I was very proud.
Or then the Raptors one. No?
Yeah.
You don't like the Raptors?
I like the Raptors. I respect the Raptors. You know, but like you're making it sound like that's a choice. I don't think that's, for me at least, that's not a choice. You know, like I just don't identify. There are absolutely times as I get older now, I feel much more Canadian. And if you were to put a gun to my head, I would say Canadian. Yeah.
I can relate. And like, I think, you know, had your parents decided to stay in China, you know, it would be a different outcome.
For
like,
sure.
Totally different outcome because, you know, like your ancestors would have been in China for like thousands of years.
Right.
As were our ancestors in China. And it was literally like 0.1% of our family lineage
Right.
that decided to move somewhere else. And so this notion of like an identity crisis makes total sense to me.
Yeah, for sure.
Totally makes sense. And you know, if you've been somewhere for like thousands of years, like an Eskimo or whatever, right? And you just get tied to that piece of land and like you kind of wonder like, why did they stay there for so long in such a difficult place like the desert?
Right.
And it's just because they're so tied to that culturally and socially.
Yeah.
And, you know, then, you know, our parents decided to uproot the families and move somewhere. And then you have an identity crisis. I think that like there are millions of people, billions of people around the world
Right.
that are starting to experience that identity crisis because people are becoming more mobile.
For sure.
And we're able to move around the world. You guys like kind of talked earlier a little bit about, you know, like the notion of like role models, you know, not enough Asian writers, not enough Asian presidents, not even one except for Xi.
He's a great one.
Not enough fill in the blank, right?
Right.
So there's a lot to kind of like talk about there. I guess, who were your role models growing up?
Yeah. Like Asian or in general?
Anyone.
Okay.
And do you think that there's like a need, like why do we feel the need to have Asian role models?
To even define it.
Yeah.
It'd be like Asian role model's a
Right,
role model, right?
Right.
Why do we have to categorize it like that? That's a bad.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. You know, I think the word role model is really interesting. I didn't have any. I don't really know how to answer that. Like my father was absent from my life at a very young age, and my mom never remarried or anything. And I think now I understand the importance of having a strong male role model, as you said, in your life. I didn't really have any, you know, whether that be athletes or business people or personal. I don't really know. Now I do actually. You know, like I'm working very hard at trying to make change and be a better person now that I'm 30. So now I would say, as ironically sounds, people like Joe Rogan.
Yeah. And it sounds like that's driving you, right? Like, I mean, Justin asks you kind of, you know, like why you're doing this and sort of what's the origin story.
Yeah.
But it sounds like, you know, you want to tap into like Asians everywhere. It actually fascinates me. And I would, not to draw like a clear distinction between like Chinese people in China versus Chinese people outside of China, like, because I respect both, but it's two different worlds, right?
Sure.
But like whenever I travel anywhere in the world, I remember I was taking my parents about 5 years ago to the Redwoods in California, and there's this city called like Arcata or something like that, and it's like, I mean, it's pretty white, you know.
Yeah.
But there was like a Chinese restaurant there, and I'm like, hey, can
like
we go to
sweet
the
and sour
Chinese
pork
restaurant? And my mom's like,
I wouldn't-
I
I wouldn't trust a Chinese restaurant there.
And I had,
Why are you going to the US to eat Chinese
exactly,
food?
right? And it was
Yeah,
like,
for sure.
I had no intention of eating the Chinese food. I just wanted to meet the people there.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
why
yeah.
the fuck are you in Arcata, dude?
This is
What's
yeah,
right?
who
And
comes here?
so,
For sure.
like, to me, it's fascinating. Like when you talked about like finding all the Asian people around the world that
Right.
kind of grew up and sort of had this culture shock of like, or not culture shock, but maybe like split identity of like thousands of years in one place. And you know, Chinese people are super duper traditional. So like from an early age, you're basically like indoctrinated in Chinese culture because like it's the most powerful culture, the longest living culture, right? We just kind of forget that because we grew up, you know, overseas. But it fascinates me that then you grow up in a different culture. So you're kind of like in this split identity. There's no culture that's, I think, is so like deep and rich is like Chinese culture.
Right.
And that's why our parents held on to it so strongly.
Right.
Then you go to another place, which is like 180 degrees different, right? I grew up in Texas.
Okay.
And so you don't really know who you are. Like, what role models do you have? If you're like a white dude growing up in America, like, role models are all around you. Just like close your eyes and pick one. If you're an Asian person, like Bruce Lee, and so I think we're searching for these things because, like you said, there's more Asians than anyone else, any other race in the world. And so it's silly to like say that every Asian should be an accountant or a software engineer. We can be anything we want to be, but growing up, were we able to find those people that connected back to like what we wanted to do? Like,
Right.
if Howie, like growing up, you want to be like a rock star filmmaker, like who would you look up to? And
Well,
who
yeah,
could you
exactly. And I
identify-
used to get shit from my family.
Yeah.
You
Right.
know, because to be like, what the hell are you doing? And I'm the only one in my family
Yeah.
that pursued that path.
Yeah.
And they'd be like, what? You know?
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure, for sure.
So is the takeaway here that kind of an identity crisis is kind of almost like a very universal Asian thing?
Yeah,
Or for ABCs
I mean,
especially.
If I can just kind of jump in quickly, I actually, me personally, I don't view it as an identity crisis, right? I feel like the word crisis has such a negative attachment.
Well, you
to it.
use the word identity
right?
crisis.
That's why I said I wanted to jump in and correct that because I think that word is just so used like, constantly. Like I feel like this is your part of what's gonna come next. Right. And like I think that's really awesome. It's great that there are things we need to work on, but we're gonna work on them, you know. And when you see the younger Asian kids these days, they are different. Because I'm right on the edge. I'm on the edge between millennials, Gen X, right? I think it's before me, and
Yeah, I think so.
Gen Z.
Gen
Is it
Z.
Gen
Gen
Z
Z is
or Gen
after.
X?
Gen X is before.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Gen Y.
Yeah, so like I'm right on the edge, and it's really cool to see. Yeah, I didn't really have any role models growing up. Now I try to look for them, right, through media. I think that's actually one of the really cool things about doing shit like this or YouTube or TV and media in general is now with the internet you can see
find
so
it.
many people. I think that's actually probably one good thing about social media actually is.
Well, especially if it's long form social
For sure.
media. I mean, there's not that much long form social media, although it's kind of I think increased a little bit in the recent years. With the format of podcasting and things like that, how popular it's been. I mean, podcasting has been around forever, but it's only recently become like super popular, like mainstream, right?
Yeah.
And you know, so like it's like that really short form like few second clip kind of social media. Like I just can't really like keep up with that kind of shit. But like long form social media where it's either a written article or podcasting or a video or things like that, where you can really kind of sit down and have an honest conversation with someone like over a length of time to like really get your points across and to really have a discussion.
Right,
You know what I mean?
right,
Instead
yeah.
of just blaring your own thoughts and
sure.
just like, okay, I said what I wanted to say and now done. My ears are closed. But
Yeah.
actually have a back and forth, right? Like that's really important. And I hope long form stuff, you know, like this really kind of gets more popularity, even here in
Right.
China, you know. I hope the podcast community gets even more popular here. And I highly encourage you to do your own podcast.
I think we will. I think we'll look at least 2 in September. But you know, going back to what you said with long form, I find it so interesting. I think we as a culture probably need that the most, right? Because
Why
like
is
I
that?
said, Asian people just don't talk about shit. Like you know, my mom's gonna hate me for saying this. She'll listen to this. But my grandfather on my mom's side was sick for at least 10 years. You know, like vegetable sick almost. And up until like 3 years after he passed away, God rest his soul, I had no idea what the fuck was going on. Like every time I ask her, she's like, oh yeah, no, it's fine. You know, he's getting better. It's some lung thing, right? But like there's no, and like I was like 25, 26. I wasn't like a kid anymore, right? And like obviously I want to help in whatever way I can. I want to at least try to understand what's going on. Dude, Asian people don't talk about shit, man. Like it's, even amongst your friends, I don't know what, I'm sure there's things you don't guys talk about either, especially with emotions and stuff, right? Or...
Well, I mean, amongst the three of us, if you listen to any of our previous podcasts, you'll know we're pretty open with each other.
good.
right?
We
get
make a
pretty-
point to
that's good.
Yeah,
man.
to do
It's awesome.
Yeah. I mean, you know, like you have to look at sample sizes. So like, I don't know if my family's an outlier, but like my mom and they over communicate. Like,
Dude, that's
like
awesome.
if they took a shit, like it's like, yeah, I took a shit. I took 4 shits today. Like, you know, so I think there's a whole spectrum, but I think in general, I found like, I have lots of like Chinese friends and lots of coworkers and
Right.
stuff. And there's definitely like sometimes a more subtle form of communication. It's less direct, you know, and it's, you know, it's part of the culture of to be more respectful and to be a little bit less sort of like absolutely, you know, kind of crystal clear about what they're thinking, especially if it's sort of a negative emotion. Things are a little bit muted, right? And it feels like they're beating around the bush sometimes. Right. When in reality, you know, you want them to just cut to the chase. Like I'll have like people that I know that I work with, that I trust, that I work closely with, and they'll call like, "Hey, how's it going?" and kind of beat around the bush, and then they'll mention something, and I'll be like, "Why didn't you just fucking say that from the beginning?" Like, "Oh, 不好意思," you know?
Yeah, but that's a very Chinese thing.
It's very Chinese thing.
Yeah. Don't you think though, as like Asian men, I think especially Asian men don't talk a lot about a lot of things.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Is that especially in China that I've noticed is that there's the gender role, right? And I mean, I've mentioned this before as an example where I would be in the situation and, you know, I like to express myself. I like to talk out my emotions.
Sure.
And my significant other would be like, why are you doing that? Just be a man, eat it up. You know,
really?
Just like back when we first started dating.
Sure.
You know?
Okay.
Not until later on, like she started getting understand, you know, the way I am and stuff like that, and then it's all good now. But back then it was like, she's like, be a man. Like, what is this?
But like, what does that mean?
What is this anxiety shit?
Right.
Like, what is this like Joji? You know, like you should just handle it. You know,
basically she's saying like, stop being a pussy.
Literally. Yeah. It's like you're not allowed to have any type of problems, or if you do, deal like you're supposed to handle it.
No, man. Like Jay-Z even had 99 problems. You know, so like men have problems. It's a thing.
The bitch wasn't one, man.
You know?
But that's
I'm not calling you the bitch.
She listens now.
I didn't say that.
I know. I can understand how that came off. I'm saying, Vivi, I'm sorry.
But going back, it's like you have. I mean, that's a general stereotype, and many people have it. You know, here especially. So there's no wonder that parents will be like that, and that kind of gets pushed down to the kids. And then we kind of think like maybe that's the way we're supposed to. Like my dad, like we never have deep conversations about emotions. Like, what emotions? What are you talking about?
Well, it's awkward, right? It would be awkward to have one, right?
Yeah.
For you or for him?
For both. Okay. For both involved. For everyone involved, I think it'd be awkward. You know what I mean?
Yeah. You should do it on this podcast. That'll be fun.
No, but I think it's not only a gender thing, although you do make a good point with the gender thing. I think it's also just an overall cultural thing. And it's almost like, I can't speak for other Asians, but I can speak for Chinese, right?
Okay.
It's almost like there's this, ingrained in this culture, there's this subtext of like, don't fucking be selfish. It's like, it's never about you. It's about other things and bigger things and the good for everyone and the good for the family. And it's not about you. So there's this sense of like, if I feel like I want to have a conversation about how I'm feeling, the struggles I'm going through, you know, like, ooh is me, you know, cry me a river kind of thing. I feel like I would be being selfish. You know,
like, we all got problems. Shut the fuck up.
Yeah, it's like how entitled are you to think like, talk about your problems. Everyone's got problems, right? So there's this sense of like, I don't want to be selfish, so I'm not gonna make it about me. Yeah. You know, and so there's this less willingness.
Healthy though? Do you?
No, I don't think it's healthy.
No,
I don't.
So it's something you all recognize needs to be changed.
Yeah.
We just ain't changing it. Or at least our families aren't changing it.
Yeah, so Stephen is like,
but it will change over time.
I hope so.
You talked earlier about like finding like young Asian creative people and like kind of finding that voice, and you know, I was thinking that like you have folks like maybe Justin, Howie, myself, even yourself. We're like a product of a very complex environment, right? We're not a homogenous environment. Like we grew up in like different places, like almost like tectonic plates just crashing against each other, right? And so like I think that whereas maybe we weren't sure of who we were before, as we get older, as you mentioned, we start to become more confident.
Good.
And we start to have more of a voice, and we can forge a new path.
Right.
And I like what you kind of like your mindset of not having, it's not an identity crisis. It's that, hey, like we're trying to figure out things.
Right.
And once we do, we're going to have a really powerful voice. What do you think the role is of a lot of these young Asian people? Do you think that like they've grown up in an environment where maybe it's more common to have Asian people overseas? The parents are a little bit less overbearing. So they might not be sort of like have as much baggage as, you know, some of us older folk. And do you think that who do you think the audience is, right? Like certainly, like I would love to hear these new, you know, powerful Asian voices. But do you think that, you know, there would be a bigger audience, that like whites, blacks all over the world, like there's a new Asian voice, and the stigma of being Asian that we've kind of experienced a little bit in our own way. Do you think that like we'll kind of push past through this so that we're going to have like a much bigger audience, and a new voice, which is not an Asian voice, it's just a voice.
Yeah. I'm going to answer the second question first because I already forgot the first one.
It's okay. It's okay.
Sorry, it's a long question, right? Like,
it's a fucking long question.
Sorry. Wait, I got to start. I was going to forget the second one as well.
Was there a first question?
No. Yeah, there was.
You had to interrupt them just so you won't forget the second question too, right?
All right, go.
Fuck, what was the second question?
The voice.
Yeah, do you think we'll appeal to like do you think we'll appeal to just like, you know, Asian people like ourselves that are trying to find ourselves, or do you think we'll appeal to everyone?
Audience, I remember. This is gonna sound absolutely terrible. I don't apologize, but I really don't care, and I don't think about it that way. I think how we might relate to this, but a lot of directors, when they writer directors, they don't think about the audience. They think about an audience of one, right? Can you confirm that?
Yeah, of course. You should think that way.
Right. So I guess for me, that's kind of how I approach it. At least for now. Because it's so raw, there's so little out there. Like we don't really know what the fuck we are right now. And eventually as this grows, it'll be a contribution of other people's identities as well, and their values and their sweat. For now, it's mine. You know, I'm the captain of this ship, and I don't really think about who this is for. Yeah.
That's good.
No, I mean, you do it as you go, right? Because if you got something to say. So what are you trying to say from this? And whoever the fucking audience is, hopefully there is an audience. What do you want them to get out of your message?
So the Noodle Shop right now is a publication where Asian writers contribute stories, and mostly in first perspective. They're usually very young. We separate our stories by flavor. So there's a spicy section, there's an umami section, there's a sweet section, and there's a sour section.
Is spicy like relationships and shit like that?
So I wrote a piece called
Dating.
I think The Myth of the Asian Penis or something like that.
Yeah.
Right. Whereas sweet stories are supposed to be stories that make you feel good after. I'm trying to target the emotions rather than the topics, right? Because certain stories are supposed to make you feel certain ways. Umami is our creative writing section, so that's like poetry, listicles, whatever. Sour is the ones that's supposed to make you like, really?
Rants, kind of stuff.
That would be anger. Maybe we do bitter one day. We've talked about it, but sour is more just like it makes you think, like, it makes you like jolt. And spicy is self-explanatory. And what do I want people to take away from this? I don't fucking know. Relatability, like someone who wrote something down, they spent time explaining their part of the story, and it makes you appreciate that they did that.
I think it's just storytelling, right? It's just storytelling. It's just relatability, exposure.
For sure.
Well, I'm absolutely curious. Like I was like, I mean,
thank you.
I want to know about like other Asian people, right? And I want to know about other Asian people that have a point of view.
Yeah.
I want to know about Asian people who grew up all over the world.
Right.
I mean, when I walked in, a shout out to Temporary Humans, TH. But you were like, oh, you know the TH guys.
Yeah.
So like, I'd never met freaking Dutch Chinese people.
Right.
That was fucking cool. I like hanging out with Dutch Chinese people.
They're cool until they speak Dutch. Then they're fucking annoying.
Yeah.
Because I know like 4 of them, right?
Yeah.
And like we've had dinner sometimes, and they're speaking Dutch. And we're like, why the fuck am I here?
The key is that you have to have a strong enough ABC contingent to just overwhelm them.
You override that.
Yeah, I don't like
squash that shit.
We always have like strong. We bring our white boys into the, into the equation. You can't have them be more than 50%. Then you're screwed. I agree. It's a harsh ass language, man. I don't want to listen to that shit. But yeah, like Chinese people in Helsinki, that's the coolest shit. I mean, I almost feel like I just want to buy a plane ticket like whenever COVID ends, and then just travel to every country, and then just like find like Chinese people who grew up in that country, and then just be like, what the fuck are you guys doing?
Yeah. Can I add one thing? Sorry, not to interrupt quickly. Yes, but also no, right? So it is Chinese people in Helsinki. which is cool, but that's been done. I think what we're trying to, or what I would like to do is Chinese people in Helsinki talking about something that you understand. So like with him, for example, or like one of the things we talked about earlier was like growing up in white neighborhoods, right? Something you understand, you all understand that. But you don't understand what that's like in Helsinki. You know what I mean? Right?
It means different.
Right.
It's something different.
But it's like, but it is relatable in a sense. Oh, sorry, that's not the right word. It's comparable personally to you, right? And also relatable. Whereas the other one's just relatable. You know, so I think that's kind of what we're looking at. I think probably where we'll start is with dating, right? Because Asian girls, white dudes is a tale as old as time.
Yeah.
And anybody can write about it. But when you start having somebody from Kenya, somebody from Beirut, somebody from Lisbon, somebody from New York, from Texas, and then, you know, Alaska, all write about it, all Asian girls, you know, from their 20s to 25s, I think that then becomes very interesting.
Totally.
Well, it all goes back to this message, man. And we've said this on the show before. It's an idea of like sending out a message to people like, look, you're not alone.
Right.
You know?
And it's important. It's the first step.
It's really important.
Yeah.
I feel like, you know, like I've gone through like some personal like shit in my life in terms of my own mental space and things like that. And the rare moments that I would listen to someone or read about someone or like interact with someone, and it gave me the feeling that like, oh, I'm not alone in how I feel.
Right.
Because it can be very isolating, some feelings and a lot of emotional baggage, right? It can be very isolating because you're thinking like no one else feels this way. Like this is so out there and so off. I'm so strange, but like this is my own shit. Like no one else feels this way. And when you do find someone that can really relate to that, all of a sudden like that feeling that you're not alone really, really helps. It really, really helps. It's like a beacon. It's like a light there.
Well, and I like I'm starting to get more clarity into, because we haven't read some of the stuff, but
Yeah, no worries.
and so we're kind of just like talking through it, and like it's thank you for helping us understand, right? Because I know, like I
try.
I can tell that you feel really passionate and you
Thank
have a
you.
vision for it, and you're learning how to articulate it. You're learning to build a community of people that can articulate it, and what it sounds like what you're looking for is people that are similar enough that you share some kind of common experience, but yet different enough that you can learn from each other. Because like if we're all just wallowing together, right? It's like, okay, yeah, we're not alone, but we all suck together. But there's enough difference in someone who grew up in a totally different environment, yet you can relate to, okay, they're in Beirut.
Right.
But yeah, you still had Jiaozi.
Sure. Yeah,
right.
yeah.
And there's still like things that bring you together, but oh, I didn't know that.
Right.
Oh, you did this. And then from that aspect, you can find that maybe they're confident in an area that you're not confident in, and you're confident in an area they're not confident in. And then together you're actually stronger, more confident. And I really enjoyed it. I don't want to just hang out with all ABCs.
Right.
I actually really enjoy when there's a mix of people that, you know, that do share something together,
right?
Yet they're actually quite different as well.
Yeah.
But I feel like going back to what you were saying earlier about identity, I think this is the identity. You know, you're not Canadian, you're not German, you're, you know, Western, you know, educated or whatever, just like many other Asians around the world. Yeah. And maybe that is the identity.
Yeah, I mean, to tell you the truth, that really bothered me for 29 years of my life. It's something that was very painful, and at this point, I've really moved past it, and I've just been okay with that. I don't need to really call my legally I'm Canadian. That's how I describe it, right? Like passport's Canadian, and a lot of Canada I love, but I don't know if it's like we have like a slight on our shoulders. I don't know if it's from like the railroads or some shit, but like I just feel like Asian people, whether that's media or porn or whatever other industry, music, has made us feel we're so inadequate.
Well, why was it so painful for you? Was it because of these things? Because of all the media and porn, all that shit?
Yeah, a combination of things. I think for me, it's I've never felt a lot of Asian stereotypes growing up, right? Because first of all, I grew up to be really tall, really young. Like I'm about 6 foot now, but I was like 5'7" by 12, right? I played sports at a very high level. Soccer is my main sport, but I was very competitive. I liked white girls from a young age. My first girlfriend was white. You know, I was a.
So you were an anomaly, growing up.
So were you like listening to all these Asian stereotypes and being like, what the fuck? Like, did it even make sense to you, or did you understand them? You just didn't apply to you.
I think what bothered me is the masculinity aspect of it growing up. You know, I view myself personally as a fairly heterosexual and masculine male for better. Yeah, no, but like
bull.
It's that's how I view myself. You know, it's not how other people need to view me, but like I've never struggled too much with my own confidence or things like that. What pissed me off is because people assume that of Asian people. Yeah, it's.
But did people assume that of you? I mean, because look, I'm meeting you for the first time in person. You come off as a very confident person. You're quite alpha in a way, right? Like, so that you just grew up that way, like your surroundings and your experiences just kind of, you were always like that? Or was there a period of time where you were like really kind of like had like confidence issues and stuff like that you had to overcome?
I would say no, because I have an unfortunately large amount of ego. So no, I haven't. But recently,
so you never struggled in that way?
Not in that way, but I have struggled mightily in other ways, you know, and it's something I've just come out of fairly recently. I think earlier we were talking about I had 3 acts in Shanghai. Dude, my second act was like depressing. It was dark. It was very lonely. Like I just was very unhappy with who I was and what I was trying to achieve. A lot of it has to do with role models, you know, but now I'm past that. I haven't struggled in that way. What I have struggled with is just dealing with our own people putting pressure on ourselves. I think is the bigger issue, actually. Right? Like how much Asian people limit Asian people.
You mean like expectations?
Yeah, our parents, our culture, you know, what is expected in a company, what is expected.
Even peers, right? Even peers.
Dating at a KTV, whatever, you know, like that has bothered me much more than what other people have done to us. And I think for me, that's the first step. You know, you're starting to see some of that change already with like younger parents, and it's really cool. But I've mentioned earlier, I think like what's important is the parents, because the parents control whether or not these kids are allowed to explore other stuff and build curiosity, like my mom let me do. You know, and I'm really grateful for that.
Well, I think I don't know. I have a slightly different perspective than you in terms of that kind of expectation and pressure and where it comes from. For me, like yes, a lot of Asian parents have like a traditional, conventional kind of like path for you and expectations, of course. But we all know that already. It's like, it's such a cliche and it's such a stereotype already. It's like, okay, that's already how it is. So it's like, you're kind of in a way, well, at least for us now as more, you know, grown up people who don't depend on our parents as much, where we kind of know how to deal with that because it's already expected. It's like, yeah, that's the way it is, right? And we've kind of like resolved that or like come to terms with that in a way. But what gets me is like even like your peers, like your other people who are you're relatively in the same age group or maybe a generation up or a generation down. And when you go out into the world, you talk to them, there's almost like this sense of judgment if you're not doing something that goes to like their expectations of what you should be doing as an Asian male. Like even this, like if I say like, oh, I run a podcast, I produce a podcast, there's almost like this like kind of like
judge, man. They judge hard.
Yeah, man. It's like, oh, so you don't do anything really serious,
sure.
right?
Who
like,
judges?
Yeah, like who? People.
Really?
But just like
people?
this,
Like who?
I'm not gonna name their names, but like, but there's like there's like this almost this like look of like, oh, okay, that's cute, you know, like oh, that's cute. Like oh, I manage a hedge fund. You know, that's what I do.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Like,
and they
you have
tell
fun
you the
with your
number,
little,
right? Because you know,
So there's kind of like obviously not everybody, right? You know, like, there's a lot of creative people who are there who are very supportive of this, but there is also what I'm saying is there is also this kind of expectation from our own peers, not just our parents. I feel like we know how to handle our parents already. Yeah. We know how to handle the older generation. We expect that from them.
Okay.
What we don't really expect it from all the time though is our peers.
Right.
And it's kind of there in a way. And there's like this competition there as well. You know, Asian people are just very competitive.
I don't think this is an Asian thing though. I think this is just a general
It could be.
You know?
It could be.
I
don't know. Every person that I talk to about the podcast thinks it's awesome. So I don't have that same experience.
Well, it's not that I don't think it's awesome, but it's cool you're doing it, but it's like, okay, for you also have a full-time job. So it's like you're doing this podcast on the side. It's like a hobby for you. So like, oh, fine, that's cool. But if you were to say like I run a podcast like as a living, like that's my career path, then it's kind of like, oh,
Yeah,
Okay,
so
that's cute.
I very much agree with Justin on this one because I look terrible on paper. Like and I've spent a year doing a headhunting job, so I know what looking good on paper means, right? I look terrible on paper, right? And
Like your resume would be pathetic.
yeah, like there is no firm in Shanghai that would hire me, for what I want at least. And I completely relate with what you said. Like I started my first company here at 22. The company was called Vomit. It was a fitness program. I'm not
Nice.
kidding. That's awesome. Yeah. People worked out until they threw up, and then we gave them a free class. But like I've lived with that feeling for 7 years in Shanghai, and I'm just at a point now where I'm very comfortable with it.
You're like, fuck it.
Yeah, because like I understood it's not about other people. It's about how honest you are with yourself.
Exactly.
Right. If you do a podcast and you fuck around, you can lie to everybody else, but right?
If it bothers you, that means you in yourself have this kind of doubt of yourself and this like expectation of yourself, or this lack of confidence in what you're doing yourself if you're letting other people's opinions bother you.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's about the amount of work that you put in, right? You guys all put in work here. We're here on a fucking Friday night for crying out loud. I mean, to be fair, we're drinking, but like, you're willing to put in the work. So why the fuck do the other people's opinion matter, right? Like as long as you're okay with what you're okay being podcast full time, you're investing time in figuring out how to grow it, right? What you're doing wrong, analyzing, watching game tape. I think that's enough.
A lot of it's in our own head, right? I mean, I like, part of it is the expectations that Asian parents or Chinese parents, whatever, have in terms of like they want you in a hard science, right? They want like in a money making profession. Like we're brainwashed on, like Justin said, like that's established from an early, maybe like a predominant amount of parents, right? We had a cinematographer, one of Howie's friends, Faye, on the show.
Yeah, I listened to her. Dude, she sounded like a boss, man.
Yeah, she's just such an agile learner
for sure.
And her parents are part of this sort of maybe newer generation of parents that are a little bit more liberal, et cetera, right? But I think it goes with the territory, right? Like if you go back 50 years in America, the parents weren't as liberal, and if you wanted to be a rock and roll singer, they would shit on you. It's the same thing.
The course.
I think that while I acknowledge that there's this whole Asian lens to it, what we don't want to do is, kind of over-index on this Asian lens, right? Like all cultures suffer from similar things, and so
of course.
I think sometimes we just we kind of tell ourselves this Asian narrative, over and over and over and over, right? That's part of it. I think the other piece is just like, if you want to run your own business,
right?
Like which Justin does or you do, right? There's that inherent lack of security, unless you're really fucking balling it. Right? Of course, people are going to be like if you're fucking making millions of dollars with your thing, or you're making millions of dollars with your podcast, people will be sucking your dick, right? But it's because you're just getting started and it's a big move. And, Asian people are sort of they're all trying to get these finance jobs or whatever, corporate jobs, et cetera, right? Like Howie had big balls. He had a nice job. He was like a general manager, and he said, fuck it. I'm going to just put my balls on the table. I'm going to be a film director. That's what I really
went out
do.
and just went to New York and made his short film out on a whim.
So that has nothing to do with being Asian.
That, man.
But I think that the Asian story needs to be told.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, I think we're talking about two different things right now, right? I think on one hand we're talking about our own personal experiences and what we have felt, on the other hand, I'm talking about the next generation, for sure. Do you know how I really respect that? That's cool, man. How's that going so far?
Yeah, it's great. Yeah,
It's killing him though.
When is
He's got too much. He gets too many deals.
He's got gout now.
At what point are your parents gonna be like thumbs up? Like when you win the Oscar or what?
Actually, I mean, to be honest, I mean, you guys met my mother.
I'm so proud of you.
Yeah, my mom is really cool. I'm very lucky to have her because she's been supportive since day one. Because I went to film school. I mean, I went to art school.
Okay.
You know what I mean? And she's the one that fought to my dad was like, no, you're gonna go study this. And my mom's like, no.
You were one of the chosen ones.
Yeah, she was, like I said, I'm very lucky to have a mother like her. And even to this day, no matter what I did, she's just like, follow your heart. If you're awesome, unhappy, then change. Do what you need to do. Really and awesome. I'm even changing career paths, going back to directing. Literally, she was like, you seem very unhappy. Then if you need to stop and do it. However long it takes.
How long have you been doing this for, if I may ask?
Since 2016.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah. Well, that's when I quit and then moved to New York, wrote a script, shot it, came back, and then
nice, respect.
And then next thing you know, this is my career now. So
cool.
Yeah, it's just one of those things. Yeah.
I think it's also going back to what we were just talking about before like not your like film career, Howie, but kind of like
I'm okay
just
talking
like
about
our
Howie's
own
film career.
personal
I'm down, yeah.
but our own personal experiences is also like this and we're all guilty of this, like we judge a book by its cover, right? Like we judge you based on what you're doing right now, but we have no idea like all the experiences and circumstances that you've been through leading up to who you are now.
Okay.
And no one takes that into account, right? But from our own very personal and selfish perspectives, we know all these things. So like it's almost like this idea of like it's almost like we expect more respect than we actually deserve, given that people aren't going to know your whole life story, right?
Right. Yeah.
You know, so it's a little bit of that as well, I think, for sure. Do you feel like because I guess like through what you do at the Noodle Shop and just like who you are, Stephen, like you interact with a lot of kind of like you know, Asian people, right?
Sure.
Yeah, especially the younger generation as well. And it's like, do you growing up for me, especially in the West in New Jersey, there was this concept of like self-hating Asians.
Okay.
Did you ever come across that? Like people who were like they're Asian American, but they were like, I'm American. I'm American.
Right.
Like they would
Like bananas,
never in a million years like identify as like Chinese.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
You're like, they'd be like, I'm American.
I went through that. I think we all do at one point, right? Like however long it lasts is one thing, but we all do at one point.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah.
Do you still see a lot of that, or is that kind of like not a thing anymore as much?
I don't know, man. Like, it's really interesting. I think obviously I talked to our U.S. Team the most about this. There's a really big movement in terms of being proud of where you come from and where you are with Asia.
But in America right now, you think people are going to be proud to like openly be like, oh, I'm identify as Chinese as well, like especially given the climate there. You know,
It might be different now.
Yeah,
It might be changing.
I don't know. I know it's gonna be a really shitty answer, but I really don't think about a lot of those things like that. I think about what we can do with what we have currently with with some of our team, and they're great. I can't extrapolate that to the majority of the young kids, right? You look at some of the Asian kids on TikTok, and you're like, "Fuck, we're in terrible hands," right? But then you meet somebody like Kyle, and you're like, "This is very different," Yeah.
I think that I really want to go back to the U.S. Just spend time with like the family and stuff like that. But I'm not going to buy into all this shit, right? Because everything I'm getting is secondhand.
Right.
We know that we have a president that's sort of like turning back the clock.
Sure.
But just removing that factor for a moment, where are we in society? I don't know. I think we've made a lot of progress probably since I grew up.
For sure.
And there's a lot
Absolutely.
more role models and like all that stuff.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
A lot of progress.
And so I think like this role model thing is really powerful because
this shit takes
like,
time, man.
Yeah, because like when we grew up, it's like we didn't have people that were confident.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah,
and so now, like, I mean, like just coming to China, ironically enough, has been really profound for me because I went through all the same experiences. I think we can all relate to each other, right? And the self-doubt and all that stuff. And part of it was just meeting other like not Americans, but like Chinese people that grew up in other places, and then realizing that like, wow, like there's a lot of awesome, badass people out there.
For sure, absolutely.
And I think like this is gonna, kind of generate a lot of momentum.
Yeah. Can I tell you guys something? Like just off the record?
No.
Yeah, you can edit this out. I don't really give a fuck. But like I have, I told Justin this when we talked. You guys, I think, are the only Asian-based Western podcast that is like keeping it real. Like there aren't that many like
We're
Asian
not gonna
podcasts.
edit this shit out. Say that again.
Yeah, no, because like I keep tabs on this now because I'm,
It's gonna be our new like slogan.
Yeah. No, because like you're here and you guys have all kind of been here for a while, so you keep it real. And this isn't like, oh, look, come to China, look how fast WeChat is growing. None of that shit, right? And first of all, there aren't a lot of Asian podcasts to begin with. I think I listen to you guys, and I listen to Dumbfounded has one.
I don't know. I got
Dumbfounded. Yeah, he's got one.
Dumb's pretty good. I used to
Are they
listen to
based
his
out of
music.
here in Shanghai?
No, he's in
as well?
LA. He's a Korean rapper.
He's a rapper.
Yeah, he's an LA-based rapper.
I gotta check that out.
OG rapper. And like there aren't a lot of other ones unless you count like Angela Duckworth Asian. My friends back home have one, but they're also small. So what you guys are doing, one day I promise you, there's gonna be some Asian dude somewhere that's looking through Asian podcasts, and you guys are gonna be on that hit. And he's like, man, these guys did it. Y'all an inspiration.
Oh yeah,
I promise you that'll happen like within the next couple of years, man.
Well,
It's really
I was thinking that earlier, and we were talking about like looking for role models and stuff like that. But then at some point, you're just like, what, you know, like at some point you're just like, fuck it, I'm going to forge my own path.
Right,
and I'm
right,
going to be a
yeah.
role model for others.
Yeah.
And I think that's sometimes what happens is like you just get to the point where like, I can't wait for a role model.
Sure.
I just got to be one.
Sure.
Well, that's one of the things that I think keeps us going.
Yeah.
Is trying to be a positive force.
No,
in the
I hope you
community,
guys do, man,
know?
for sure.
Well, it's also that fuck it mentality, right?
Yeah,
like
yeah.
we always go back to this. Is like the subtle art of not giving a fuck. It's really that fuck it mentality, which I started adopting a while ago, and you know I've gotten my fair amount of shit for it. Like, but like it's really just like a truly fuck it mentality.
Isn't that a nice feeling though?
Oh, it's
Right?
so liberating.
I think this is what people
So liberating.
What people don't understand is there's a difference between subtle or not giving a fuck and being rude, right? Like you cannot give a fuck and prioritize yourself without being an asshole,
of course, yeah.
right? Yeah, my ex was really into that book too. I read it. It's a really good book.
It's a great book.
Yeah.
Well, here's the thing also. If you are just an asshole and you don't give a fuck, you're just perpetuating your own behaviors. I think Asians are super sensitive. We actually care too much about what other people think, right?
Really?
That's part
You
of
think
our
so?
culture.
Okay.
It's like 不好意思, right? So in some, like, you know, at least I think I speak for myself and maybe for some of us, is like we grew up and we're kind of like taught to be very respectful and more respectful than most. So I think that we kind of need to not give a fuck because we care too much about what sort of other people think.
It's a common thing, right? 面子, right?
Yeah, fucking 面子.
That's part of the whole worrying about what other people think.
It's
Right?
interesting.
Well, it's like your reputation.
Not,
Right?
not Justin's being all hard, right? He's like, I don't give a fuck, right? Like 2 episodes ago, we're like being emo. We're like, I'm not so good. I gotta really improve myself.
Yeah. No, look, I think everybody has to improve themselves. That you should definitely give a fuck. But I also think the older you get, the more, if you invest time in yourself and understand certain people, you should absolutely give a fuck about. But the rest of them is,
Well, the not giving a fuck is not like, oh, I don't give a fuck about anything.
Right.
It's more about choosing what to give a fuck about.
and being in control of that.
Being
choice.
selective. And
for
control,
sure.
but also being selective about what you give a fuck about.
For sure.
And there's a lot of things that we previously gave a lot of fucks about, whether it was consciously or subconsciously. That if you put some mindfulness to it, put some like attention and effort towards it in terms of analyzing it, you realize a lot of things we were giving fucks about really aren't that important. Right. And we're lumping them into these priorities, and it's affecting our decisions and how we feel and a lot of things,
Yeah.
And, a mindset that I've kind of adopted more recently, well, maybe not even adopted, maybe I had adopted a long time ago, but I kind of like had a term for it. An explanation, a definition for it more like, it's more like anarchy of your mindset.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying? Like anarchy, like where there were always these like rules and boundaries and expectations and paradigms and etiquette and expectations of how you were supposed to think, how you were supposed to live your life, how you were supposed to like think about how to move forward, right? And what I adopted is like kind of like anarchy almost, where it's like there are no more rules. Like why like there's enough rules in society already around me. Why do I need to impose more rules in my own head about what I should do or what I shouldn't do or what I can do or what I can't do? And it's more like it's like an uprising in my own mind of like just like fuck it, anarchy. Let's burn the shit down.
That's why you started a podcast.
Yeah, well, it's one of the reasons. But it's like burn that shit down and start anew. And every day is a new day, and I get to be a new person every day I wake up, It's more of that kind of mindset, I guess.
You read my mind, Stephen. You busted out the
I brought some candy, man.
I was looking around. I was like, where's
I
Were
don't
we
know
all
what-
thinking
what
about the
it
candy the whole
sounds-
time?
Yeah, I brought candy.
You read our minds.
Okay, Howie, this is a trick actually. While they eat the candy, I actually would really love for a minute to talk to you.
Yeah.
Because I think so. Just to keep you guys up to date, last year when I turned 29, I had a midlife crisis.
Already?
Yeah,
Well,
man,
fucking
I
30
don't-
early
I don't-
midlife crisis?
I don't,
Oh, the
I don't
early
plan
midlife
on living. See, like I don't want kids. I don't want to live.
Yeah,
that
the
long.
quarter
50
life
is
crisis.
good. Yeah,
Quarter
yeah.
life crisis.
But basically, like I was in a job that paid me very, very well. They treated me very well. It was an interesting job. I don't want to get into too much, but basically, I just like, all right, fuck this. I quit. I had some life savings, and I decided to get into film for the rest of my life. So I feel like we could have our own separate podcast aside from this. But I think what I would love to hear from you is, for me, this entire change, everything you see tonight started from this, right? One night I went down African American film history wormhole. You know, and you look at where African American film history was in the 80s when Morgan Freeman first started, and the amount of roles that black people were allowed to play. There weren't that many. It was like 4 or 5, like a secondary character, butler, driver, whatever. And then in the 90s, that changed with action. And if you actually just look at Will Smith's entire career log, what he could play in the 80s and what he could play now is very different. You know, now you have like Black Panther, 12 Years a Slave. And I think what it does to like young African American kids in the US who grew up watching black people who can be leads, who can be rom-com leads, male and women, who can be superheroes. It's very powerful, in my opinion. Right? And then kind of reflecting on that with our people, and that doesn't exist. So I actually made a bet with my friend of mine, his name is Daniel, where if Crazy Rich Asians did well, I would, you know, take a career in this. I would seriously look into it. So that's kind of where I'm at right now. That's my priority. You know, I love the Noodle Shop. It's great, but that's really not my priority.
So you want to really get into film?
Yeah, I want to get into film because it's you know, and this is where the writing came from as well, right? But what people have to understand is that I went back and studied the African American part. So like that took 30 years. We're not going to take 30 years, but we're still going to take at least like 10 years, 5 years, right? And Crazy Rich Asians is such an important first step because it allowed white people to see a bunch of Asian people on screen and enjoy the movie. Like, fuck this, the story isn't very good. Like, we can say that here, right? Yeah.
I hated the movie.
Yeah, the story is just not, the characters aren't very dynamic. They're not very, it's a good
awesome.
movie.
I thought it was very enjoyable.
I couldn't even finish it. I'd walked out halfway through.
Dude, I thought yeah, I agree, but the production design was fucking amazing.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, no, it's an important first step. I agree with that.
Yeah, it's a first step. So here's the thing, right? Like, you can't have 12 Years a Slave if you don't have Crazy Rich Asians.
Yeah.
Right? Would you agree?
Yeah. Okay. So here's my take on Crazy Rich Asians and my problem with it, which is, I mean, I'm not saying I'm anti Crazy Rich Asians because for what it did,
No, absolutely
it caused
not.
a lot of attention. There's a lot of, you know,
For sure.
But that's also why I don't like it.
For sure.
Because there's such a spotlight on it, because it's such an anomaly. It's so like, oh my God, this is a fully Asian story. Until it gets normalized. You know what I mean? Where
But it takes a movie like this for it to get normalized.
It's a process, for sure.
I get it. That's what I'm saying. Like, I'm very supportive of what it did, but at the same time, I'm looking forward for the future.
Where
Like,
do you stand on the farewell?
I haven't watched it yet.
You still haven't watched it?
Yeah, I still haven't watched it.
Watch them,
Yeah, actually, one of the Faye,
Yeah,
the
for
DP, her first AC, which is the first assistant, was shot that. You know, worked on that.
Dude, there's some young Chinese filmmakers that are actually really interesting, like B Gun, Derek Kwan, and them. You should definitely check it out.
Did you see Gook?
I have not.
Yeah,
I've not seen it. But so I think for me, why I made this jump, because I've done a lot of shit in my 20s that just I didn't know what I wanted to do in my 20s, right? The way I explain this, in my 20s, it's like walking to Baskin Robbins. Like I tried 60 flavors in my 20s, right? And in my 30s onwards, what I've decided is I'm gonna find the best lemon ice cream in the world, right? Which hopefully will be in film and media for me.
Hone down on one thing.
well, we
I
could
like
definitely
that.
talk more about this. I mean, for sure.
Do you want to be a director or a screenwriter or both?
So for
or
me,
like-
it started from writing, you know, and how we can comment on this because I believe it needs to start from the writing, regardless of production company, studio, whatever. It needs to start from the writing, right? Because that's when you have to.
But there's also the biggest like 最缺的东西.
Yeah, Howie's always saying that. Like, it all started, like he would be happy to do like a feature or stuff if he had a great screenplay, like a script.
I have a short film right now I'm looking to shoot. We can talk about that at a separate time.
Do we have something here? Do we have something brewing?
No, but you know, I think going back to like a lot of things I'm trying to do with the Noodle Shop is great, but my thesis for film is kind of what drives me. It's the same thesis. It's Asian masculinity. It's
Great.
taking like what Bruce did to the next level, right? Like, how do you do what Bruce did in a rom-com?
How do you be the modern day Bruce, right?
You know, it's
Right.
funny. So I have this one script that I have that I've been, you know, it's always like constantly going back and forth on working on, which is slightly based off of my high school experience.
Okay.
And you know, you always have the coming of age stories, and I think I mentioned to you
You
this
like
before,
those,
right?
yeah? Huh?
Yeah, so you have those coming of
They're
age
good.
stories and stuff like that. But like, you know, using myself as an example and kind of glorifying it a little bit, it's like I want to tell the coming of age for the Asian student, you know, in a non-Asian school,
Do
but
it.
the guy's not a nerd. The guy's not like,
Do it.
you know what I mean? And it's not about like, oh, the Chinese guy.
Or you break the stereotypes.
Yeah, he's just a fucking coming of age story. Period. You know what I mean? That happens to have like a Chinese family, you know, as the main cast.
Yeah.
You know, it's normalizing. Like that's the biggest thing for me is normalizing things.
Well,
so
yeah.
like even as like sorry, real quick. It's like when I was doing music, 'cause I used to play music, and I was
Okay.
like the lead singer and guitarist. I hated when people I remember when people said like you don't have a big Asian audience, right? And I'm like, who the fuck cares? I don't care. Like it's fine. Cares? You know what I mean?
It's not for them.
Yeah. And then at one point though, we played this Asian showcase, and this guy comes up to me and he's like, oh, I just want to say thank you, for doing this because I'm looking around and I see like white people looking at you, like, it gives me confidence, right? And I'm like, if that helps you normalize things to live in America, then great.
Yeah.
But this is not supposed to be a special thing. You know what I mean? It should be like whatever.
Normalizing comes with quantity, right? When you have enough, when you reach a critical mass of things,
shit like
it becomes
normal.
normal.
Like this podcast.
Well, and I mean, I think that this is where this goes back to the subtle art of not giving a fuck.
Right.
We honestly shouldn't be giving a fuck about that. I mean, think about this, right? If you look at like non-Asian sort of that film, like there's plenty of like these coming of age, like nerdy guy becomes like, we're almost putting this, we're overcompensating or being self-conscious. There's plenty of weak white stereotypes all the time. And that's not perceived as weakness. That's just perceived as reality. People are normalized to that. So I think I do acknowledge that, there's this sort of like some Asian sentiments and stereotypes that we want to get across. But if you guys can make a film where there's not that self-consciousness.
Can I add something quickly? Sorry, before that. I think your opinion is so fucking important. Like, there needs to be more people like you. Because I absolutely...
I don't know about that.
No. Okay, well, at least with that opinion. Right? Because, like... No, I completely agree. There needs to be a healthy balance.
Yeah.
Right? Because you want it to be Asian, but like at the core of it needs to be a story. Right? Like there needs to be, we want to normalize and we don't want to specialize it, if that makes sense. Right?
And you don't want to be self-conscious because like it's easy to be the victim. And like I completely acknowledge that, and the analogy I always use is like you get dealt a deck of cards or a hand. And you didn't get the best cards. And so for African Americans, the analogy is that they got dealt like shitty cards for hundreds of years. Like they didn't even get dealt cards. They were like fake cards.
Right.
They were like, they put the card
They
out.
weren't
like,
even in the game. They
weren't even
at the
fucking at the table.
Right.
Right. And at the same time, you can like, and I don't want to speak for them, but for Asians, is we can take it too far.
Right.
And we put the mouths on ourselves.
Yeah, I completely agree.
And so like there's that fine balance there. And so like I love what you're doing. Like I think you should keep doing Noodle Shop and pursue this. It's like, look, like being Asian is fucking awesome. Yeah. And it's unique and it's a privilege. How many people tell you that being Asian is a privilege? I lived my whole fucking life until the last couple of years until I realized that being Asian is a fucking privilege.
I've never heard that.
It's a motherfucking privilege.
Question. It's a very good question.
Yeah, no, it's great. I just never heard that.
And so we have a unique point of view, and this is a learning journey. You asked some questions about like the podcast and all that stuff. We're on the same journey as you, right? And I think that like there's going to be some great things that come out of it. But like we don't want to parade the fact that we're Asian. We just want to make good shit for people.
You make such a good point, man. You make because you don't want the agenda to be so overly stated and obvious where people are like, fuck this.
Yeah, that's why I meant like, we don't want to be Fox News of Asia.
Exactly.
Right?
I love that.
You want it to be want it to be like palatable, like where people just find it as good content, period.
Right.
Regardless of its message, that's just good content. Because when it becomes too overly saturated with like a certain agenda where it becomes so obvious and clear, you just get turned off to it. You turn off to it. You're like, fuck this shit.
It reeks of weakness.
Yeah.
And you want to get to a point where truly you don't give a fuck, but not like in a bad way. Yeah. Truly you're just like,
I really think they should change the title. Like the title should be focus on yourself.
Yeah.
Right? Like that.
And your values.
Yeah.
You asked like
what title?
Like the subtle art of not giving a fuck. The title should be just focus on yourself.
Yeah, but that title is more catchy.
And I asked you like, and Stephen, I asked you earlier, and like, I mean, like, maybe to some people it comes across a little bit cocky, but like, having talked to you for the last hour, it's like I really appreciate your brashness and your energy.
Yeah.
Because you said earlier, like, I don't really care at this point of the audience. Like, I know I should care, but I'm just trying to do something that like resonates with me.
Sure.
And it doesn't mean you don't care about the audience. It just means that your compass and your North Star is defined by you.
Sure.
And then you calibrate over time.
Sure. Yeah. To add to that, look, I've been called cocky and arrogant since as far back as I can remember. I think I'm just at a point now where I'm very comfortable with it, right? I'm able to kind of separate my confidence and my self-belief from being a fucking asshole. I hope I haven't been that much of an asshole tonight. But I do my best. You know, and in terms of it's not about not caring about other people. It's just, look, we all have limited amount of days on this earth. I would rather do something that I really believe in, something that benefits other people and that I believe can make money. Like, I'm not gonna, tell you I want to be a saint or anything. No, the goal is to fucking have my own jet within like 4 years. Right? I already picked it out. We did the paint job already.
So I have Justin is pretty has a knack for like coming up with the titles for the shows. I think this one should be called either like I'm not an asshole or
No, I have to tell people that a lot. Like, I'm at the bank and I have to tell people I'm not an asshole.
You have to tell people that at the bank?
Yeah.
Why?
You just see me walk in, they assume I'm an asshole.
Wait, here?
Yeah.
Why? Why did they just assume you're an asshole?
Kidding. No, this is a joke on it. The banking process in China is very challenging sometimes.
Okay,
right?
I think the bank is an asshole. Honestly, the bank is one giant asshole.
Yeah. Yeah. Sorry,
how'd you come up with the name, the Noodle Shop?
Oh, this is good. God, we got here. I should have done this earlier. This originally thought about, and if I do have a podcast, by the way, I think it might be something like Shades of Yellow. And this kind of ties back to
We should just use the Noodle Shop, man. I think that's a great name.
No, the goal is to build a noodle shop as like an umbrella.
Okay.
Right, and then have the individual podcasts.
He's got big
underneath
plans,
that. Yeah. But the goal, the original idea was that like I want to just have conversations with different Asian people. Like, how he's very different than you. It's very easy to classify all three of you as ABC guys who are in Shanghai.
Oh, we're so different.
Right?
Yeah.
Right. But I'm just saying, to like a lot of white people, to a lot of white people, you're the same. You're three ABC dudes in their late 30s or mid 30s.
Yeah, don't lump me in with these guys.
Right. I think the goal for Noodle Shop is to just kind of show the difference, and for sure. The idea with noodles was, in every culture in Asia, you have a different type of noodles, right? You have ramen in Japan, you have jjajangmyeon in Korea, and I had to do a bit of research, but I found
pho in Vietnam.
Dao Xiaomian in the north.
And then
Chinese has like 1,000 different
right, and that's the interesting part, is that once you get past the national, then you have the regional, right? And then noodles are also something where you can have them for 3 kwai or 3 Michelin stars. I think so. For me, it was a perfect representation of that. But also, when you look at what LeBron James did with the shop, choosing the barbershop, the barbershop is a part of African culture. I would love for one day where if you met up with friends for like a Friday night, like because you just go to the noodle shop. You have a local noodle shop that is like relatively nice, quiet, peaceful. You have some noodles, you have some
place
drinks.
where like a lot of culture is exchanged, a lot of gossip
just
is
that,
exchanged.
Like Paris during their writing age and so. Yeah.
The noodle shop is to Asians what the barber shop is for black folk.
I would. That's
the mahjong
the
table.
name.
So I already see
the mahjong
table,
table for sure. Yeah,
I already see this. All right,
The
so
KTV.
the noodle shop meets the honest drink.
Yeah, happy to do it, man.
Hey, look, I seriously, I'll say this on air, man. Like because you're obviously a very creative guy.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it.
I think like kind of like the concept, even the concept of the noodle shop, but even like the subcategories you had with the different like profile, like flavor profiles and what they meant and what you're trying to do with film. Like, dude, I think with our powers combined, there's a lot of collaborative kind of opportunities maybe going on in the future.
Always happy to.
But it's like it's all along with the same message, and I'm so glad like you're here on the show today, because it's like I feel like you, in many ways, represent a lot of the things kind of like we kind of preach on this show. A lot of the mindset things about like, number one, not giving a fuck. Number two, about confidence and just like knowing your path. And like, yeah, we all go through shit. It's not like you haven't went through shit, but it's like you come to terms with that and you're like, well, you're not going to let that define you.
Right.
And, again, like I said before, like every day you wake up is a whole new opportunity for you to reinvent yourself.
Yeah, that's the fun part, man.
Yeah, it's so fun. It's so liberating too when you can finally realize that you are not defined and chained to your past.
Right.
Because truth be told, no one gives a shit about your past. No one's there documenting your life story. Your life story and everything you've did in the past, everything you regret, all the mistakes you made, that's all up in your head. There's no one in the real world that cares so much about you to care or even remember what you've done in your past and all your life events. So that's just a narrative we tell ourselves.
You know, like,
so when you can free yourself from that and you understand that when you wake up, every single morning you wake up is an opportunity to completely reinvent yourself. That's a very liberating and empowering kind of mentality.
Right.
Totally. Think about boxing, right? So like, you know, when boxers go in and, you know, like, and they do the walk and, you know, they kind of choose like their song, right? Now, has anyone put like some fucking sad ass, mournful, like fucking gloomy song? Nah, they're all like just hard hitting, positive, confident, you know, powerful fucking songs, right?
Right.
But Asian Americans or Asian, you know, outside of, like, we grew up and sometimes we were just constantly played this sad ass fucking song our whole fucking lives, right?
Right.
So imagine the fucking soundtrack that goes in your head every morning when you wake up.
Oh, I can send it to you. I have a Spotify playlist.
Nice. I want to.
What's on your playlist?
I want.
There's a lot of David Goggins.
It's like
just yelling
Frozen.
at
Looks
you,
like the
man.
Frozen soundtrack.
I love fucking David Goggins. David
It's
Goggins,
a lot of
like,
Goggins.
Oh, you
yelling
got
at
guys.
David
Goggins
Goggins is, like, I'm a huge.
Eric is a
David
huge
Goggins
fan.
Can't hurt me.
Eric is definitely
Can't
a
hurt
huge
me.
fan.
Yeah,
Eric,
yeah. I started doing some Goggins shit, but anyways,
he's got this cookie jar going on.
yeah, I got my cookie jar going on. So, I mean, but imagine the soundtrack, right? I have, like, for many years, I had a pathetic ass fucking soundtrack. I mean, it was like,
Wasn't your soundtrack A Whole New World, Aladdin?
it was way worse than that. It was like some fucking wailing violins and shit, right? But imagine, like, no, seriously, do this exercise, right? And the next week,
It was
at
milkshake.
different parts of your day, think about what music, what soundtrack would be playing right now based on your emotions, right? Think about it. And I think that, like, sometimes we play a fucking sad ass fucking soundtrack. We have these invisible scripts, these invisible soundtracks, this playlist that's just playing. I wake up sometimes, I get out of bed. It's a fucking pathetic soundtrack.
It's almost like your idea. You said the word cloud. It's like a word cloud,
It's
but for
a word-
music.
yeah,
Like,
it's a word cloud
The
for
amount
music.
of the
Yeah.
type of music you listen to more
Oh, yeah.
often kind of represents your
Even our
state of mind.
dreams, is like, I'm this, I'm that, right?
So if
And
everyone's listening to like depressing, like "Woo Is Me" kind of songs,
Totally.
like ballads, that kind of like represent your mindset. Right?
Exactly. Like fucking sad ass fucking Schindler's List shit, you know?
Right,
And like, no, like we don't have to do that.
Yeah.
You don't have to play that soundtrack,
Right.
right? And I think that, like, having you on the show, right? Like, I mean, it's like it's really fresh. Like, you're edgy.
Cool, thank you.
You put some pop
Yeah.
into it, right? Like that. Like, I think we get emo sometimes.
But I think he
This-
just adds some youth into it because we're all.
Well, I mean, I think
Dude, I just turned 30. I've officially started yelling for kids
You're
to get
a
off
young
my
buck.
lawn. You know, like, can I add something quickly? You know, first of all, I don't know how long. Like, if you need to cut or whatever, just let me know. Like,
that's fine.
we're-
We go as long as it's
we good.
needs.
We do Rogan style, man. We gotta go
Cool.
4 hours. We go 4 hours.
You know what? The one thing. This is when I turned to become a Rogan. This is what I learned from Joe Rogan, man. Like, Joe Rogan had to learn to be nice. He said that before, you know, and like when I heard that, it made me realize, like, I have to learn to be nice. I have to learn to be, you know, better, and like this, it's a process, right? Like, it's no longer about who you think you are, or your past. You can't control your past. Your past is only good for one thing. It's from learning about it for yourself.
Yeah.
You don't need to share with nobody as long as you know you're honest with
no one
yourself.
cares. That's the
Nobody
biggest
fucking
thing.
cares, right? You know, there's not much you can do about it. And I want to make it very clear to you guys, as to anyone who's listening. For me, this is very recent. This is like post-COVID. You know, like I made a decision last summer to pursue film, but I made a decision this year to like change shit. You know, and we talked earlier about my birthday, man. Dude, I went to my birthday with anxiety and depression for the last 20 years.
Wait till
Right.
you're our age.
That's a different kind of depression, right? But you know, it's at this point, dude, I'm so comfortable and happy with where I'm at, and
That's
if I can
great.
share that
It's
with
fucking
people,
beautiful, dude. Yeah.
you know, like, life is short. Fuck other people, man. Like, there's people who matter. He matters, right? But other people don't really matter that much, you know.
Well, like, look, you brought up Joe Rogan, and I'm gonna get into it right now.
Yeah, let's
about
go
him.
there. I'm happy to go
because
there, man.
because
I love Joe.
clearly he's had an effect on you.
Very much.
And he's had an effect on me,
Very
and
much.
it's not for what people typically think. It has nothing to do with his podcast.
Okay.
Like, look, I say this, and some people laugh at me, but Joe Rogan to me, like, because everyone needs to define what is success to you.
Right.
Right. Everyone has a different definition of success. Right. You can, maybe Elon Musk is your hero, and that is
Elon's cool. I respect Elon.
Of course, fucking yeah, man.
Yeah, Elon's cool.
But like searching this world and like kind of finding like what is success. The moment, and this is obviously later in his career when he had already success with his podcast or anything like that. But a few years back, I looked at Joe Rogan and I was like, that is what success means to me.
Yeah.
That is my definition of success. Yeah. And the whole reason being is, at least outwardly, I don't know him personally, obviously, but at least outwardly, he seems to be doing exactly everything he wants to do on his own terms, in his own time, and making a killing at it. So if you look at his three main things, one is stand-up comedy.
Sure.
Right? So he's a stand-up comic. He still performs. He makes money through that, and that's his main passion. Number two, he's passionate about MMA and combat sports. He's the main voice of the UFC, right? Makes a killing doing that. Does that whenever there's a big fight, and he's happy to be there because he's friends with all the fighters. He loves watching the fights. He gets the best seat in the house. Number two. Number three, obviously the podcast, right? That might probably the biggest revenue generator he has. And that's just him fucking around with his friends, interviewing awesome, really cool people and learning from them.
Right.
And he does it all on his own terms. There's not one thing he doesn't do on his own terms.
Right.
And he does it on his own time, and he makes a killing. And to me, that is success. Look, he's not Steve Jobs. He's not Elon Musk, right? He's not all these crazy successful people who are under immense amount of pressure, right?
Yeah.
He seems to be doing exactly what he wants to do while minimizing the amount of pressure he has to deal with because he gets to do things on his own terms.
Yeah.
But he's making a killing at the same time.
Okay.
And that to me is success.
Right. Am I okay to jump in? Can I ask you something? Right. So how he just described Joe Rogan, I sound like I got hard, first of all. Second of all, everybody has that feeling about something, right? Like him is that, which is great. You have something, or you have something, Howie's being a director. Your friends have people like that. What if I just told you, okay, here's the list of things you have to do, and then you can be that. Would you do them? Like if it's like, because we live in a day and age now where if you put in the work, right, you'll get there. I mean, you may not get to
some degree. To some degree, not necessarily.
I very much disagree with that. Like this bothers me, right? And let me explain my side of it because when I say you're willing to put in the work, it's not what you define as work, right? Because how you think about work and you think about work is very different than reality, right? The reality for Howie, if he wants to be Steven Spielberg, is if script writing is what he's bad at, he needs to figure out how to fix that. And then one step after that. And that might mean doing ayahuasca. That might mean climbing Mount Everest, right? That might mean cutting yourself. I don't fucking know. I know that sounds terrible.
Whatever it means. Whatever it takes.
Right.
Yeah.
But like, I think a lot of people have this limit on what they're actually willing to sacrifice. And in reality is there's so many other things that you can try. Right? Like if what you want to be Joe Rogan, if what you want to be is be like Joe and make things on your own terms, there are other things you can always try. Does that make sense kind of?
It makes sense in terms of you can aspire and try to take steps to be that.
The last segment was bad. I apologize for that.
But there are I think there are definitely certain realities which you're never going to be exactly that, right? Like, and not to say that I want to be exactly Joe Rogan. I don't. Right.
You want to be your version of Joe.
I want to be my Joe, but like I take cues from him in terms of what he's done with his life. So for him, I like his form of for him like stand-up comedy to me would be like something else. Would be my stand-up comedy, right? Him commentating for the UFC would be my different thing of my version of comedy. Right. So it's not that, but yes, you can learn things from them and strive to be like that, but. Look, at the end of the day, but there are also realities. Like there are certain realities in terms of maybe the amount of talent I actually have to be a commentator or to be a stand-up comic. Even though, like, let's say, for example, I really wanted to be a stand-up comic. There are plenty of people out there who their dream is to be a stand-up comic. They work day and night to try to be successful doing stand-up comedy. There are so many struggling comedy actors or just even actors. but they just never get there because, like, look, they're just not that
It's
good.
not for everybody.
They're just not that good, and that's the reality. No matter what they think internally,
Right.
And also
they're just
luck.
not that good.
Don't forget luck.
No,
too.
I think luck is a big part of it for sure. Yeah, for sure.
Oh no, Joe Rogan has definitely had his share of luck
Yeah.
in terms of timing and everything. Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah. But I mean, like, you know, I don't think Joe Rogan ever thought that, you know, he would achieve this level of, I'm not going to say the word success because I think that's very subjective.
Sure.
I don't think Joe Rogan ever expected to get
Be in
to
this
this
position.
level
No.
of scale.
And he said
in terms
that.
of what
Yeah.
he does, right?
Yeah.
And like, you don't have to get to the point where you have 1 billion fans. If you really enjoy what you're doing, if you're constantly improving and growing and putting out great content or whatever
Right.
it is, you know, like, you know, you can be happy with whatever your audience
Right.
is, right? I think you have to get to a point where you can monetize so that you have, you know, a some type of financial base.
Well, the ability to continue doing
Yeah,
what
the
you wanna
ability,
do.
yeah, exactly. The ability to continue to do things.
Can I ask you a very Asian question?
Yeah.
Is this something that we can solve mathematically at this point after a bottle of scotch? Because what you just stated should be able, like, you know, the risk at 22 is very different at 32, right? With kids, without kids, very different.
So you think there's a formula to it?
Look, here's the formula, okay? Like in a very rough, like more of a kind of a conceptual way. So Daniel Kahneman, you know, Nobel Prize 2002,
sure.
right? Cognitive bias, all that stuff. So like a few years later, him and another guy, they did research around like, what does it take to be fucking happy? And they did the research, and basically it's like $75,000 a year income in most places.
Very
You're
famous
good.
study,
Anything
yeah.
above that, more money, more problems, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's really two things. Number one is that what would you do if you couldn't fail?
Right.
You got to ask yourself that question. That's what you're basically asking. So like all this shit about sucking Joe Rogan's dick and this and that, right? It doesn't matter, right? Or like, oh, I don't have this talent, that talent. No. If you couldn't fail, what would you do? Because
Right.
you owe it to yourself to go for it.
Yeah.
Which you have with the podcast, right? Like you've been the sort of the mastermind behind the podcast, right? We have to give you props for that, right? And then I think the second piece is just like, how much money do you need? Like, you know, like, and money's not going to make you that happy, but you just need to have subsistence for your family,
Yep.
you know, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
And I don't think that's a big deal. We're all fucking like educated and shit like that, right? I don't think we're like gonna starve and shit.
Sure.
So you do your thing. You're lucky. You should be grateful that you're in a position where you can do this
very
shit.
grateful. I know, dude, like absolutely.
super
Like, I
grateful.
don't have a girlfriend. I don't have a family. I don't have kids. I have one mother, and she's financially okay for now. You know, very thankfully, and we have
Yeah.
a great relationship. So
Does she live in Shanghai?
She's in Vancouver.
Oh, Vancouver. Okay,
Yeah,
cool.
yeah, I miss her a lot.
I miss my mom too. She's in Houston. We should all give a shout out to our mothers.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
You know, I think just
Sorry, go ahead.
no. Yeah, so my mom's in Vancouver. I completely forgot what we're talking about again. Oh, it's been fun.
Hell yeah, brother.
No, it's gratitude, right? We're talking about gratitude.
gratitude.
Right.
Well, I think we all feel gratitude. I mean, like, but what you're saying is absolutely right, Eric. Like, I mean, like Eric, you're almost like kind of like the voice of reason. You know what I mean? Like, whenever, like,
it's
Which is so
useful. It's
interesting.
very
so
useful.
great.
Yeah.
Which is so interesting.
Because in real life, I'm not, right?
Yeah,
In
yeah,
real
so
life,
it's-
I'm
no,
not.
if you know
fascinating.
if you know anything about Eric in real
Right.
life,
It's
he is absolutely not the voice of reason.
Yeah.
We're always like, what the fuck, Eric?
Right.
What the
Chaos.
fuck?
Okay.
The devil.
But
I'm
on the
devil.
podcast,
Right.
he is absolutely always the voice of reason.
fascinating.
And it goes back to what you said about him. It's like it's so important to have people like him,
Yeah,
to have
I
that
believe
kind of
so.
perspective and come in, because otherwise we get too much on our high horse and
Yeah.
we kind of like saturate the message too much with like our agenda. For
sure.
Where it just becomes like it's not palatable anymore, and no one's like everyone's like, okay, I see right through this, right? But look, I think everything we're talking about today, in a way, is exactly like kind of the things we think about on a day-to-day basis and what we want to go through. Like, and I think what we hope our listeners can kind of look. We said this before, and it's about not feeling alone. Like, I'm not gonna sit here and say, "Oh, I have the answers, and now listen to me," because I don't, and you shouldn't listen to me. But what I can do is I can tell you how I'm thinking, how I'm feeling, what I'm going through, what I've learned through the way. And if it's if it's relatable to you in any way where you feel like, oh, fuck, I'm not alone in this.
Right.
And that feeling of like, oh, I'm not alone in this gives you all the energy and reason to kind of fight for yourself again. Otherwise, you get stuck in this vicious cycle of like, oh, I'm fucking never good enough, I'm blah, blah. And it's just this vicious cycle, downward spiral of like where you just lose even the motivation to help yourself. But I've known from personal experience when I've listened to other people who I don't even know, who don't even know I exist, but I know that they're like, oh shit, dude, they're going through the same shit I'm going. Like I can relate to them. It gives you a kind of a new breath of energy where you're like, maybe it's worth fighting. Maybe it's worth fighting for myself. And look, man, I think from early on, I think you've had the fortunate position of like understanding that. It seems to me that like it's about fighting for yourself. And there's this misunderstanding or there's this gray area, so to speak, of like maybe you can come off as an asshole, but it's like fighting for yourself doesn't mean you're an asshole. It means you're fighting for yourself, but you can be, you know, very kind and giving to other people. But it's about knowing what you want, knowing what you're going to give a fuck about, knowing what you're not going to give a fuck about, which is equally as important.
Right.
And moving on from there.
Yeah. Yeah. If I can just add one thing, maybe it's a good way to close this out. It's honestly been really great. Life is really short, I feel like, for a lot of people. And just the fact that if you're young and you don't really know what to do, it's okay to reach out. I feel like we grew up, I don't know if you had mentors growing up or like older, because a lot of Chinese people are single children, right? It's very not common for Asian people to reach out.
Yeah.
Especially among closer age peers. Right? Like not an uncle, not, you know, 你爸的叔叔啊, or, you know, 他高学同学, like, you know, somebody in your life who you respect who is like 5 or 8 years older. I really wish more of us would try to reach out, because if you never reach out, you're never gonna get helped. Yeah, a lot of people might think you're weird, or, you know, they think you should, we don't do this or whatever, but if you just try to reach out, and I think with the Noodle Shop, that's the part that's been really surprising for me, because that's forced me to be better, right? Like, that's forced me to hold myself to a certain standard, because these people have reached out and volunteered.
Accountability, right?
It's accountability, you know, for sure. And tying everything up with role models is, I'm at that point now where I realize that I didn't have role models growing up, and if I can set some, that'd be great. Hopefully they won't be terrible, but I really hope if we can leave this tonight with one message, is that more younger people who are Asian, who feel like they're alone, you're not. There's Facebook, there's Reddit, there's 100 different ways. And yeah, sometimes it's going to be a bad experience, but there's people who care. And then, you know, to have people like you to just keep doing this. It's been really cool.
Yeah, and for everyone who like grew up and kind of wished there was a mentor or a big brother, then you get to the point where it's like, okay, like it's not just about you. You've learned so much. You learned you went through the school for hard knocks.
Yeah, I did.
You can be that big brother, right?
Or sister.
Yeah, or sister.
Probably not.
So I think like, you know, for the elder statesmen, you know, Justin and Howie, I think, you know, there's a responsibility.
Yeah. Sure. And very welcoming, actually. You know, I think it's very, I mean, personally, I'm at a place where I am very happy.
Dude, giving back is nice.
Very happy.
Really. Fuck yeah.
Yeah, that's one of the things I learned. Giving back is nice. Yeah.
Cheers.
Cool.
To that,
Cheers.
Man.
Cheers, guys.
Yeah, thanks, man.
Thanks
for
for
bringing
having
the
me.
shit. For sure. Everybody knows when you bring shit, I'm gonna fucking go to town on it, dude. I'm gonna go to town.
Yo, we finished this fucking bottle, dude.
Good.
Mortlock 15. We've come to completely finish this bottle.
People bring snacks,
and we're gonna continue
I
drinking.
fucking just go to town.
Yeah.
I ate all your fucking candy.
Yo, thank you, Stephen, for coming
you.
on.
Thank you.
I'm
for having
Justin.
me.
I'm Eric.
And I'm Howie.
All right, guys. Peace. We love you.
Peace.
Bye.
See ya.
But as the sun will see